Your name is a strong and mighty tower. Your name is a shelter like no other.
Hello again. This is Dr. Daniel Gillenwater here at Eastern Oaks Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, and I'm bringing you your PSA, or Practical Sermon Application, for the week of October the 14th, 2012. This past week we continued our study in the book of Daniel by looking at Daniel chapter 5 once again. And Daniel chapter 5 is a great chapter to look at around Halloween because some really spooky, scary, creepy stuff is happening. In Daniel chapter 5, the Babylonian king, Belshazzar, is having a big old party. And he looks up and he sees the fingers of a human hand writing a message on the wall. And he is scared to death. And I can't blame him. I've been scared to death too. Of course, he eventually calls in Daniel, and Daniel interprets the message for him. The message wasn't good for Belshazzar. This past week in the service, we compared Daniel to Belshazzar to see if we could identify some differences between the two. We noticed that while Belshazzar was fearful, Daniel was fearless. We recognized that while Belshazzar was confused, Daniel was confident. And when the chapter ended, we noticed that Belshazzar suffered the consequences for his actions, while Daniel reaped the rewards. We then ask ourselves one very important question. Who do we resemble? Do we more resemble a fearful and confused Belshazzar who is suffering the consequences for our sinful actions? Or do we resemble Daniel, fearless, confident, enjoying the blessings of God? It's a difficult question to ask yourself, but it's an important question. You see, the fact is that fear, confusion, punishment often accompany disobedience to God, whereas fearlessness, confidence, peace, the blessings of God accompany obedience to God. We need to be willing to evaluate our lives on a regular basis and ask ourselves, are we living in obedience to God? And the easy way to evaluate our lives is to simply ask ourselves, are we living in fear? Or are we living in peace? Are we living in confusion? Or are we living confident lives? You see, the world is confused about a lot of things. The world is afraid of a lot of things. But as followers of Jesus Christ, there's no reason to be afraid. 2 Timothy tells us that God did not create a spirit of fear. There's no reason to be confused. 1 Corinthians tells us that God is not a God of confusion. If we will humble ourselves before the Lord and obey Him, and not just obey Him in the things where we want to obey Him, but if we will humble ourselves before the Lord and obey Him in all things, regardless of what the world says, regardless of what the politically correct people tell us, if we will obey God in all things, we can live lives of confidence, of peace. We can live with the blessings of God. That doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean we're never going to have problems. But even in the face of problems, we can have peace. We can have joy. And we can enjoy the life that God has for us. But all of that comes with obedience to the Lord. I challenge you this week. Evaluate your life. Hold your life up to the Scripture and ask yourself, are you living in obedience to the Lord? If you can identify areas where you're not living in obedience to God, make a correction. Make a change. Hope you have a wonderful week. I look forward to speaking to you again next week.